Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this informational webinar on the Sector Training Evidence Building Project, or STEP. I'm Jessa Valentine. I'm Deputy Director for Learning and Impact at Ascendium Education Group. And on behalf of Ascendium, I couldn't be more excited about the launch of this evidence building project. At Ascendium, we're committed to a future where more learners succeed in post-secondary education and workforce training as a path to upward mobility, regardless of economic background, race, rurality, or history of incarceration. And based on what we know to date about sector training programs, we believe that these programs that can offer more flexible, affordable, and accessible pathways for learners are one important option or model that's going to help us move towards that future. Based on existing research, we know that sector training programs can meaningfully improve labor market outcomes for individuals who participate in them. At the same time, there are still relatively few sector training programs where we can point to this strong evidence of effectiveness. We also know, based on engagements we've had with both researchers and training providers over the last year, that there are many questions that remain unanswered and that will be critical to address if we want to continuously improve upon this model, understand the key features and components of these programs that matter most, and if we want to understand how effective programs can reach more learners, and especially more learners from low-income backgrounds and other populations we care about. So that's what this project, STEP, is all about. It's about generating new evidence that can help answer these important questions. I know folks are eager to dive into the meat of this session, so I'm going to be turning things over to MDRC, who's been our partner in co-designing this initiative and who will be leading the implementation of this project. But before doing that, I do want to quickly acknowledge a couple of members from my team here at Ascendium who've been instrumental to the development of this project. So thanks to Bethany Miller, our Director of Learning and Impact, and to Marianne Rainey, Senior Program Officer and our resident sectoral training expert. I'd also like to thank Dave Anderson, who's been a core partner in this work and who's been serving in a consultant role to Ascendium. And of course, a huge acknowledgement and thanks to the whole MDRC team, who brings tremendous expertise and a very long track record of research and technical assistance in the sectoral training space. And with that, Donna, I will turn it to you and your team.
Donna, you're currently muted.
Sorry about that. Thanks. I just wanted to start by just thanking Jess and her team. MDRC really shares in Ascendium's excitement about STEP, and we want to thank Jessa and her team for their partnership that we forged over the last several months. Besides me, our team includes everyone you see on the screen, Frida, Kelsey, Alexandra, and Francesca. Together, we'll be managing STEP with Ascendium for the next 5 years. As Jessa said, despite the promise of sector training programs, there are still gaps in our knowledge about how they could be strengthened. STEP invites researchers and sectoral training providers to partner in research projects that are broadly relevant and which expand our understanding of effective practice, not just for individual organizations, but for the workforce development field. MDRC is really thrilled to have a front row seat to learning from the research of the STEP grantees. We've got a lot to cover today, and we want to be sure everyone leaves the session with clarity about STEP. We'll start by touching on the STEP opportunity, then continue with an overview of each of the items listed on this slide. This list roughly follows the sequence of the RFP, so if you want to follow along, a link to the RFP document is being shared in the chat right now. Let's first touch on a few housekeeping items. First, if you experience any technical issues during the webinar, please let us know in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. You'll hear back from Kelsey McKinley. She's our Zoom expert, and she'll help you do any troubleshooting. A reminder that all attendees will be muted throughout the webinar, so any communication with us should be channeled again through the Q&A. A reminder that this webinar is being recorded. We'll post a link to the recording on MDRC's STEP website on Friday, October 11. So if you'd like to play it back, or if you want to share it with folks who were not able to join today, you'll have access to it. We'll also make the slide from the webinar available at the same time. The STEP website address is being shared in the chat right now. We know many of you dialed in because you have questions. We'll have time at the end of our presentation to respond to questions. So throughout the presentation, type questions into the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. Frida will be monitoring questions throughout, and she'll help us walk through them. Depending on the number of questions we received today, we may not have a chance to answer them all, but all questions will be answered. Those asked today will be compiled into an FAQ document. And after the webinar, we suspect people will still have questions. Send any additional questions to the STEP email address by October 17. And we are sharing the STEP email address in the chat right now. We'll post all questions received before, during, and after the webinar on the STEP website on October 25. So let's get started. I'm going to turn things over to Kelsey.
Thanks, Donna. I just want to first echo everything that's been said so far, and also, again, just highlight how excited we are to be working with Ascendium on this opportunity and to be at the point where we are today talking with you all about STEP. So to start, this slide up here summarizes just at a very high level what the STEP opportunity is. I'm just going to emphasize a few key points that I think underscore what STEP is about. The first is that STEP will be supporting research projects. So we're really focused on and excited to be building the next generation of evidence on sector programs. We know how important funding for programs is, but this support offered through STEP is focused on research that can help inform future programs rather than support for program operations currently. The second part is that the projects are going to be action-oriented. So we want the evidence and learnings that come out of the STEP projects to be useful for both the sector program that's being evaluated, as well as to the broader field of sector and training providers. And this is what led us to deciding that we want these projects to be done by partnerships between researchers and sector program providers. And then third, I want to point out that STEP is aiming to build evidence in two areas. The first is around the key elements of effective sector programs, and the second is around the effectiveness of sector programs that have not yet been rigorously evaluated. And again, this is just very high level, and we're going to be drilling down and unpacking all of this coming up. Before we get too far, we want to make sure that everyone here is on the same page about what we mean when we say a sector program, since we know there are lots of definitions and frameworks out there about sector programs and sector strategies and sectoral strategies. So here we're just referring to them as sector programs. I recognize that people use different names. And on this slide, you can see how we are defining sector programs for STEP. Hopefully none of this is too surprising to anyone. We are defining sector programs as programs that first provide training for jobs in a specific industry or a specific sector where there is high growth or high demand, and that training results in participants receiving a credential or a license or a certification. Second, it's programs that use thought-through recruitment and screening processes to reach and bring in the people they hope to serve. Third, it's programs that provide other services too, including support services that can help participants while they're in the program. So things like transportation assistance or tutoring or referrals to outside organizations. It also includes career readiness services. So things like offering training around soft skills or 21st century skills, or helping people develop resume and cover letters. And it also includes job placement services to help people connect with and obtain quality jobs. And then the last part of the definition is that it's programs that have deep connections to both employers, and they have knowledge of demand and trends that are going on in the industry that they are working within. We know there's a lot of variation across programs, even within this definition that we have up here. And we know that there are likely cases where a program considers itself to be a sector program, but it doesn't meet one of these criteria for a good reason. So to be eligible for STEP, we are looking for programs that meet most, if not all, of these criteria, but we're not requiring that programs have to meet all of them. So we are not going to exclude a program, for example, that does almost everything up here, but let's say doesn't offer a credential because the jobs they're training people for don't require credentials. So if that is your case, or you have a similar case where you don't meet every aspect of this definition, we'd just like you to tell us what that is and the reason behind it when you submit your application. And finally, one thing that's not up here, but I want to note up front, and I'll come back to a bit when we talk about eligibility, is that for STEP, the sector programs have to be run by nonprofit organizations, and that is something that we will be screening on. If you have any questions about whether your program or a program that you want to partner with meets our definition, please feel free to send an email to our team and we're happy to discuss. So now we're going to dig a little bit deeper and talk about the specific areas of inquiry that STEP research projects must focus on. As Jessa mentioned before, we know there are a lot of questions out there about sector programs and their effectiveness. And because STEP is funding multiple projects and has the goal of enhancing the overall evidence base, we developed 2 high-level research questions for STEP that you can see up here that we would like all of the projects that are funded by STEP to fall within. And we think this is going to help ensure that we build a more cohesive body of evidence. These 2 research questions came out of background work that MDRC did along with Ascendium. We did a scan of the current evidence base that's out there around sector programs, and we also did a scan of ongoing studies to see what other evidence will be coming out in the next few years. It is also based on 2 convenings that were held, one that was held with researchers and one that was held with staff from sector programs. And both of those were focused on identifying research agendas and open questions in these areas. And then finally, the MDRC team conducted interviews with a set of researchers, government officials, and sector program staff to get their input on where STEP should focus its resources and what types of knowledge would be most beneficial and feasible to develop as part of STEP. We are not asking projects to answer these specific questions as their research questions, but rather we want projects to develop their own questions that they feel are important to both the program that's being evaluated and the broader field that align with one of these broad areas mentioned in the questions. The first research question is, what are the key elements needed to implement or expand access to effective sector programs? And the second research question is, what is the effectiveness of sector programs that have not been rigorously evaluated and that can expand understanding of the sector model? We have a document, which we're going to link to now in the chat, that will give you examples of project-specific research questions that could fall in these 2 areas. So for example, under the first high-level research question, a project-specific question could be, what are the most effective ways to provide technical skills training, or who is most likely to benefit from participating in a sector program? And under the second high-level research question, a project-specific question could be, are sector programs that target people who live in rural areas effective at increasing earnings? Or what additional services do sector programs that operate in rural areas need to provide to support participants? So you could adapt one or a few of the questions that you see in the document, or you could come up with entirely new questions that are related to one of these 2 areas. The examples that we give are really meant to just serve as examples and to get you thinking about possibilities that align with the STEP research questions, but we don't want them to limit your thinking as you come up with ideas for projects. We want the research questions put forth by projects to be creative and strategic and relevant to your programs that are being evaluated. And we are very excited to see all of your applications and hear more about your project ideas and research questions. And again, if you have questions about whether your project and your research questions align with STEP, feel free to reach out to the MDRC team. In addition to the research questions that will guide the focus of the projects that are in STEP, we also have 3 priorities that we will be using as part of our selection process. And we'll be looking for projects that through their research questions and through the composition of the project teams incorporate these 3 elements. And we believe that incorporating these priorities into the development and implementation of projects is going to make for stronger research projects that contribute new knowledge. You can see the 3 priorities up here, and you'll be asked to touch on each of these in your applications. The first priority is that projects should inform how to increase the reach of effective sector programs. This can be done in a variety of ways. Projects could build evidence on how to effectively reach more or different types of job seekers. Projects could also focus on trying to understand the barriers to and facilitators of sector programs as they expand. Projects could also focus on how to make existing sector programs stronger for key populations. The second priority is that all projects should have an equity focus. And again, this can be demonstrated in many different ways. Projects could demonstrate equity through the diversity of their team. And I want to note that in particular for STEP, we are welcoming researchers and nonprofits who have not had the opportunity to be part of a research project like this before. Projects could also demonstrate equity by the types of analyses they do. You could use participatory research methods or subgroup analyses. Projects could also focus on programs that target specific populations, such as people with a history of incarceration. Or you could demonstrate equity through another dimension, and we're really open to what you all bring here. And the third priority is that projects should be relevant to the broader workforce development field. And by relevant, we mean that the findings that come out of projects should inform both how the sector program that's being evaluated operates, and they should speak to the broader field and other providers by filling an evidence gap or identifying best practices or providing information on how other programs can improve their operations. I know I've gone through a lot so far, so just want to remind everyone that if questions have come up, please feel free to put them in the Q&A and we will come back to them at the end. Okay, so switching gears slightly, we're now going to talk more about who and what STEP is funding. So applicants for STEP must consist of 2 partners. The first is a researcher or research team, and the second is a sector program provider. And these 2 groups come together to form a partnership who then applies for a STEP project. We are emphasizing these partnerships in STEP to ensure that the funded projects have the 2 types of expertise that we think are needed to both design and implement an evaluation that's relevant to the field. The sector program provider staff bring expertise on things like their program, their community, the people they work with, and the challenges they face and the questions they have. While the researcher brings expertise on things like research methods and analysis and how to integrate research into program operations. So this united team coming together, we think will make for stronger overall research projects. The researcher or research team in the partnership will be the lead applicant, and we'll touch more on this and what this means coming up. We also have eligibility criteria for each partner. For the researcher or research team, we have only 1 criteria, and that's that someone on the research team must have prior experience with the research methodologies that are going to be used in the proposed project. There are a few eligibility criteria for sector program providers. The first is that programs have to meet STEP's general definition of what a sector program is, which I showed a few slides ago. Programs must also be nonprofit organizations. And the one slight caveat there is that while the lead sector program provider has to be a nonprofit, that nonprofit can partner with other organizations, including ones that are not nonprofits, to offer some of the services in their program. So for example, if there is a nonprofit that runs a sector program and they partner with a community college to offer the technical skills training, they could still be eligible for STEP as long as the nonprofit is the lead provider. The programs also have to target and serve adults who are low income. They have to have a general overall goal of improving participants' earnings. And they have to collect and track data on participants' participation in their program and training completion outcomes. And Donna is going to be saying a little bit more about this partnership coming up later. We are funding projects for STEP in 2 different tracks, which we are creatively calling Track A and Track B. The main way you can figure out which track you should apply for is going to be based on the research methods that you plan to use. You can see the research methods that align with the 2 tracks up here, and I'm going to say more about these coming up on the next slide. So after you figure out which track you're in, you can see the anticipated funding ranges and project lengths within each of the 2 tracks. The Track A projects have lower anticipated funding amounts, up to $750,000, and are somewhat shorter, up to 3 years. While projects in Track B can have higher anticipated funding amounts, up to $2 million, and they can last up to 5 years. And this is because randomized control trials, which are part of Track B, typically require more resources, and it can take more time to be able to track longer-term outcomes for participants and impacts of programs. One note on the budget amounts is that you can propose projects that fall below the lower thresholds of the ranges you see up here, but you cannot propose projects that fall above the upper thresholds. And again, if you have questions on which track you should apply for, feel free to reach out to our team. So just a bit more on the research methods, since we think there may be questions around this. We really want the projects in STEP to be based on what you all think the field and programs most need to learn about to improve the effectiveness and reach of sector programs. So similar to how we aren't specifying specific research questions that projects must answer, we are not limiting the types of research methods that projects can use. And this is one reason why we think the partnership between the sector program and the researcher is really important. The 2 parties can come together to identify the key questions from the program, and the researcher can provide guidance on the method that can be used to answer those questions. We want applicants to select the research methods that make sense for their proposed idea and will allow them to be able to answer the research questions they're interested in. So starting with Track B, I'll just go back. So Track B includes projects that are using experimental designs. So these are designs that typically involve randomization of people into a program and control group. And they typically allow you to look at the impacts of a program or the impacts of an element of a program. And this includes randomized control trials. Track B also includes rigorous quasi-experimental designs. So these designs typically involve comparison groups and include, for example, matching designs, so things like propensity score matching. Within Track B, we are prioritizing randomized control trials, as well as projects that include implementation research in addition to the impact study. And this is because randomized control trials are very rigorous, and they will help us fill or better fill knowledge gaps, and they tie back to the STEP priorities. And one last note about Track B is that if you are in this track, as part of your project, you will be required to write and register a pre-analysis plan. And then for Track A, we're really open again to what makes sense for your project. But Track A includes things like implementation research, by which we mean projects that are focused on understanding how programs operate, how they can operate better, and views on the program. These don't necessarily look at participant outcomes, but they can. Track A also includes non-experimental designs. So these typically don't have a control or comparison group. It could be straight outcomes analyses. You could use a pre-post test design. And Track A also includes secondary data analyses. So this could be extensions of evaluations that have already happened, or they could use data from a prior evaluation to do a new analysis that has new research questions and is distinct from what was done before. So overall, we're just really interested in projects that include other designs too. You could do cost analyses in addition to some of these designs, or use participatory research methods. And whatever your method is, it just needs to track back to the STEP research questions and the priorities. So I'm now going to turn over to Donna to talk about how you apply for STEP.
Thanks so much, Kelsey. We've heard a lot about what we're looking for in terms of STEP priorities, research questions, and research methods. So let's turn to the application process for just a couple of minutes. There are 3 stages to the process, which I'll describe in a moment, but I want to first talk about the optional pre-stage, which is a voluntary step. Some of you are attending today and you have a project idea, but you don't have a partner. And as Kelsey explained, a STEP applicant is a partnership between a lead researcher and a nonprofit sector training provider. To help facilitate partnerships, we designed an optional pre-stage to help introduce unattached researchers and unattached sector programs. So if you'd like to participate in this stage, again, it's not required. Researchers and providers must submit a 2 to 3 paragraph summary of their project idea and a description of the skills and traits you're looking for in a partner. You should submit this information to the STEP email address, which is in the chat already. Once we receive this information, we're going to compile and then distribute these summaries back to all submitters, who can then review them and reach out to others to inquire about collaboration. I want to point out that contacting potential partners is the responsibility of individual organizations, and participating in this stage does not guarantee a match or affect your chances of being invited to submit a full proposal. So that's the optional pre-stage. Moving on, the STEP application process includes the following steps. Numbers 1, 2, and 3 is outlined on the slide. They are the letter of interest, or the LOI, the full proposal, and finally the notification of award. So let's talk about the first stage, the LOI. All applicants must submit an LOI so that eligibility for STEP can be established. The LOI is a series of 22 questions plus a narrative, and the document is structured in a survey format. We have also developed a PDF of the LOI questions so that you can work offline, then copy and paste your responses into the form once you're done. We're sharing a link to the LOI and the LOI PDF in the chat right now. Although the LOI requires applicants to provide information about their research team, their proposed research project to demonstrate alignment with STEP's priorities, as well as their interest in the STEP research questions, you'll note that we're not asking for lots of detail. This is intentional. We're asking for less detail because the primary purpose of the LOI stage is to establish eligibility for STEP. So as you prepare your LOI responses, keep in mind that you are required to submit an example of prior work demonstrating that one of your team members has experience working in the research method that you're proposing. And at the LOI stage, you may submit a letter from the sector program provider written to the researcher that makes clear their commitment to participate in the research project. It's not required at the LOI stage, but if you advance to the proposal stage, you must submit such a letter with your proposal. We've designed a rubric that we will use to score LOI submissions according to the following parameters. 1, research team experience. We'll be looking for experience with the methods proposed for your project, knowledge of or experience with research on workforce development. Oops, sorry. So that's the first parameter, research team experience. Number 2, organization and sector program readiness for evaluation, meaning for the organization, we're going to be looking for any evaluation experience and even your organization's data infrastructure, for example. And then for the program, we're going to be looking at how long it's been operating, how the program aims to improve employment outcomes, and other factors. The third thing is the strength of your research design and its ability to answer the questions you've articulated. The fourth is the overall fit with STEP priorities that Kelsey discussed. So do you have an equity focus? To what degree are you shedding light on how to increase the reach of sector programs? Will you produce findings relevant not just to your organization, but to the field at large? And then finally, we will consider the diversity of the pool of LOIs we receive. We're going to be looking at the geographic diversity and the diversity of the sectors represented among the projects proposed. Applicants that meet STEP eligibility requirements and those whose LOIs responses align with STEP goals will be invited to submit a full proposal. That's the second stage of the process, the full proposal. When you're notified that you're advancing in the process, MDRC will schedule a meeting with your team to discuss questions we have about your LOI submission, and will want to respond to any questions your team may have before you begin drafting your proposal. As you might imagine, it's at this stage that you will be required to provide more and more detailed information. We'll ask you for a fuller description of your research project, a detailed budget, and bios and resumes of key team members. More information on proposal requirements will be discussed in the meeting your team has with MDRC. The third and final stage of the process is award notification. And based on the content of the full proposal, we will select applicants to participate in STEP, to become STEP grantees. Everyone who submits a proposal will be notified of our decision one way or the other. Okay, so we've just talked through details on the application process. Let's review for a minute some of the key dates when all of this is happening, starting with the optional pre-stage and going through to the award notification. So for anyone participating in the optional pre-stage, your project summaries are due on October 21, about a week and a half from now. Then MDRC is going to share back with submitters all the information we've received on October 25th. All LOIs are due November 15, which is a little over 5 weeks from now. LOIs will be reviewed by the MDRC team and will notify applicants of our decision about whether you've been invited to submit a full proposal in mid-December on December 16th. And as I mentioned, MDRC will schedule a meeting with each team invited to submit a full proposal. And we'll conduct those meetings just after the first of the year in early January. Then your proposals are due in mid-February. Finally, we'll notify applicants whether they have been selected for STEP in late March. And we'll be working with grantees to get ready to launch projects in May. Let's take a few minutes and talk through some key points about project budgets. At the LOI stage, I want to emphasize that we need just an estimate of your total funding request, not your final budget, just an estimate. Again, the different funding tracks that Kelsey reviewed earlier will dictate your budget level. And as a reminder, the funding tracks are up to $750,000 for track A and up to $2 million for track B. So take a look at this slide for a moment. Regardless of the funding track, these are the types of activities that can be covered with STEP funding. So project management for both the researcher and the sector program implementation related to the research for the sector program, research planning, data collection and analysis for both parties, and public deliverables, which both will contribute to the paper, the conference, the report, whatever it is that you decide is the best representation of your work. STEP dollars can also be used for travel so that the researcher can travel to the sector program office for interviews, data collection, and other activities. Here are a few things to keep in mind at this point as you think about your estimate for the LOI. We expect that most grant funding will go to the researcher, with an appropriate proportion going to the sector provider to cover allowable costs. And budgets can include both direct and indirect costs for the time period of your research project. We're not placing a cap on indirect costs, but your budget estimate should break down costs for the researcher separate from the nonprofit sector provider. And it should be clear that funding allotted for each is sufficient to fulfill the tasks you're describing that each will undertake. We want to be able to look at your LOI submission and come away with a sense that there is sufficient funding and time for each partner to fulfill the roles that you're describing for them. If you're invited to submit a full proposal, remember that you'll have that one-on-one meeting with our team During these meetings, we may discuss questions about your budget and request modifications to it based on what we learn at the time. We'll also provide you with a budget template, lots of detail, during this meeting, which we'll discuss. And we think that's going to help you develop your project budget, your full detailed project budget. Again, feel free to submit detailed, individualized budget questions in writing to the STEP email address, step@mdrc.org, so we can accurately respond to any specific questions. Before we pause for questions, I want to talk for just a moment about what will be expected of STEP grantees, keeping in mind that more detailed information will be provided when grants are awarded. First, the researcher will be required to enter into an MOU with MDRC. MDRC is managing the STEP initiative and will be dispersing funds. The MOU between MDRC and the researcher will spell out reporting requirements, schedule for progress check-ins and payments, the role of each entity, and of course, will include a project budget. Also, the researcher and sector training provider must enter into a partnership agreement as well, and that agreement will be shared with MDRC. Importantly, this agreement must include provisions for data sharing to facilitate analysis of program data. Second, MDRC is also organizing and managing a community of practice for STEP grantees. The community of practice will take shape once grantees are selected and after we see what types of research projects the partnerships have proposed. With your input, we'll design something that makes sense in terms of an area of focus. We want the community of practice to operate in a way that best serves knowledge sharing and peer support among grantees. Over the life of STEP grants, we plan to virtually convene grantees just 3 or 4 times, but we're also going to be looking for other informal opportunities to bring grantees together. Next, we're also going to be prioritizing getting the word out about and promoting your research and especially your findings. So as Kelsey, I know, mentioned this, all grantees will be expected to share their findings publicly. As we've mentioned, that's one of the priorities of STEP, that your work be relevant not only to the participating sector training provider, but also to the broader workforce development field. This can happen in a variety of ways: a brief, a report, a video, conference presentation. Again, we'll have more details on that once we are much further into the initiative. Finally, as Kelsey mentioned, for research teams that choose track B, analysis plans will be required. Again, this will mainly be projects conducting randomized controlled trials and other rigorous quasi-experimental and impact evaluations. You'll be required to both draft and publicly register analysis plan within the first few months of your grant. And with that, we've concluded our presentation, and I'd like to now turn things over to Frida, who will share some questions we've received.
Thank you, Donna. So I want to encourage you to continue to add questions in the Q&A icon. We have quite a number. I don't think we'll get to all of them in this few minutes left, but we'll try to get to many of the ones that you have. And again, we will continue to collect questions all the way up through October 17th. And we will be posting all the answers to all the questions, not only from the chat today or from the Q&A today, but also others that we get in the future on our website. But before I start, there were a couple questions that we got before the webinar started a couple days ago that I just want to go over, and then we'll get to some of the questions, and some of them are the same. So one question we got was, how many submissions are allowed from a single firm or a provider? Can a team submit multiple submit multiple LOIs? And the answer to that question is that nonprofits can partner with multiple researchers as long as the projects are distinct. Similarly, the same partnership can submit multiple applications, but again, they have to be for distinct research. So it can't be the same research. It has to be two different projects. But you do have to submit as a team. If you have a provider that has multiple researchers that are interested in working with you, and you have 2 distinct projects, you could submit 2 distinct LOIs. Another question is if you're a sector program that has been involved with rigorous or evaluation in the past, are you still eligible for a STEP? So the answer is yes. If you have had participated in other evaluations, you are welcome to submit an LOI for STEP. But make sure that you consider the research questions that were outlined and that your project will build new evidence. But we also want to encourage new programs or programs that have never been part of an evaluation to also apply. And then finally, another question we got previous to this webinar was whether apprenticeship programs or pre-apprenticeship programs are eligible for STEP. And the answer to that is, apprenticeship programs are specific types of workforce training programs and models, and with they have specific set of requirements. So they're not the focus of STEP. Ascendium is certainly committed to and will continue to invest in apprenticeship efforts, but not through STEP. So if you're a pre-apprenticeship program or an apprenticeship program, this opportunity would not be for you. Okay, so let me start with some questions related to eligibility that we got. One question we got was if when we say a nonprofit, does that include a community college, or are we only referring to a community-based organization? Donna, you want to take this?
Although community colleges are, well, they're public sector entities, we're talking about 501c3 nonprofits. We don't view a community college as a nonprofit. So community colleges would not be eligible as the lead sector training provider. They could be part of a team that a nonprofit operates. And I know this is something that Kelsey talked through earlier. So a community college can participate, but not as the lead. They must be a partner with a nonprofit.
Okay, similarly, we also got a question related to whether the research partner also has to be a nonprofit.
The research partner does not have to be a nonprofit.
Thank you. Okay. I think we answered this question. Can the research team be from the same? Oh, no, we didn't actually. Can the research team be from the same sector program provider organization? And I can tell you, Donna, you could answer this or I could answer this, but no, we are looking for an external research partner to the provider itself. So if you have, if you're a provider that has an internal research team, you would need to partner with an external researcher to apply for this opportunity. Okay. Let's see. There was a question about what's MDRC's role in this? Are we also going to be the researcher? What's our overall role? And I'll bump that to Donna.
MDRC is not going to be seeking a partnership with a sector training provider to conduct research. While that is work that we have done historically, certainly, we are managing the initiative, the STEP initiative, so that officially disqualifies us from that kind of role. We're managing the initiative. We will be making selections according to the criteria that we've established and awarding grant dollars. So no, we will not be competing with all of you out there to have the opportunity to work with these sector training providers.
Thank you. Okay. Another question is if you apply for track B, say, but you later identify that track A is better fit for the project, will STEP help facilitate the change to track A as part of the application evaluation process? Kelsey, do you want to take this?
Yes. And I think the answer would be yes. I think in the LOI, you would specify which track you think your project falls in, or you're welcome to reach out to us in advance if you have questions about, you can tell us what your project's about and we could help give some guidance. before you submit the LOI. But I think as part of the LOI, we will review the tracks and make sure the assignments that you all selected seem right. And then if you were selected to move forward, as Donna said, we'll be having these meetings with each of the teams that are invited to submit full proposals. And that's something we could discuss with you at that stage.
Thank you. Okay. Another question, and can a research lead submit more than one proposal?
Yes,
Donna?
sure. Yes, that's entirely possible. It could be with the same organization, 2 different projects or multiple different projects, or could submit with many different organizations, the same research organization. So the answer is yes.
Thank you. Okay, Kelsey, so a question on methodology. Is there any sort of a minimal sample size or program scope for track B or track A for that matter? Any requirements other than methodology we should keep in mind when preparing an LOI?
I think nothing specific. We are looking to you all to, as part of your LOI and if you're potentially your full proposal, tell us what the sample size that you think you can enroll in the study is, as well as the justification for that. So it's not something we are necessarily implementing or giving you all guidance on. That's something we will be looking to you all to provide as part of the application, and then we'll be reviewing it as part of the selection process.
Okay. A question about if you're a researcher or a nonprofit provider searching for a partner, sounded like we were saying that only if you're a program that you should put in a solicitation or a statement to search for a researcher. And that then the evaluators can reach out once those providers have identified themselves that they're looking for a partner. So is that true that only nonprofits, providers should be putting in statements if they're looking for a partner?
That optional pre-stage is meant for both nonprofit providers and researchers. We suspect that there are researchers who've joined today that are quite interested, have ideas, but they don't have relationships necessarily with nonprofits. So that optional pre-stage is available to both.
Thank you. Okay. One question about whether we will be providing a list of attendees and or potential research or research organizations.
I can take that. I think if you are looking for a partner, you should submit the 2 to 3 page or 2 or 3 paragraph, not page summary about your organization, your skills, your interests, and what you're looking for. And that'll be part of the optional pre-stage that Donna has discussed. We will not be sharing the list of attendees and research firms that attended the webinar. So if you are looking for partners, you should take part in the optional pre-stage.
Okay, and can we combine multiple occupations within a single industry in the same study? I think Kelsey, you might be best to answer that.
I think the short answer is yes. I think we are open to, again, as long as it fits the research questions and the research design. It could be of one track that you might have within your sector program. It could be of multiple tracks. I think it just depends on what the focus of the project is and what you're hoping to learn from it.
Okay. And then the last couple questions that I think we can cover today. This is kind of the role of a public university. So I'm going to combine these 2 questions. So the one question is a public university research team that's a 501c3 fiscal agent eligible to apply? And then the other kind of related question, is there an expectation that researchers are currently affiliated with an institution of higher education?
The quick answers are yes to the first. A nonprofit research center at a university, absolutely. And I think the second, I'm sorry, could you repeat?
Yeah, is there an expectation that we're looking for researchers that are affiliated with an institution of higher education?
No. And we're hoping that we have spread the word about STEP widely enough that it has piqued the interest of researchers who may not have participated in this type of initiative before. So we were looking far and wide for not only researchers affiliated with higher ed institutions, independents, private sector, all types of researchers.
Okay, I think these last two are easy to answer. So do you have to be in New York to apply? And the answer, I'm just going to go ahead and answer that. No, you can be anywhere in the US to apply. So we just happen to be, our main office happens to be in New York, but that doesn't mean you have to be there. And then they had a question about, does the lead applicant, what is the lead applicant, the research partner? Donna, you want to take that?
Yes, it is.
Okay. All right, so there were more than 40 questions, and we're almost at the top of the hour. I wanted to go over the last steps, and we are going to answer all of your questions that we didn't get to, and also put answers that we already have given you for the questions that we were able to answer on our website for you to able to access after this webinar. So let me just go over the last steps, and I really we all appreciate having you all for this hour, but we can wrap up soon. Donna, next slide. Okay, so I want to review these next steps. So the RFP really is your key document. I would highly recommend that you review it, follow the guidance and the related materials that are associated with the document, which includes the LOI and the research questions. There's a lot of information in that document, but of course, if you have questions that come up as you engage with those documents, and also speak with your partners in this submission, and you have questions, please go ahead and send us additional questions. The email address, as we have put in the chat, is step@mdrc.org. We were also going to be posting the webinar recording and the slides on MDRC's website by the end of this week. So you can also access those materials and this recording there. And as I mentioned before, again, if you have questions, please submit them to us by the 17th. We'll be posting the responses to those questions, shortly thereafter by the 28th. And then if you need a partner, really recommend, as Donna mentioned in this sort of pre-stage, that if you're searching for a partnership, either you're a provider or you're a researcher, go ahead and submit to our MDRC website a summary of what what you want to research, and we will be sending out then to those who are searching, the responses, so that you guys can form partnerships. MDRC is not going to be involved with making the match. We're going to let you all do that, but we want to let those that may not have a partnership already established to find each other. Okay, and then we'll be submitting all the questions, and we'll be answering all the questions that we got today, and others that come in afterwards on our website by the 28th of this month, so shortly later in this month. And then finally, we want to, really encourage you to develop your project ideas and to submit your LOIs. The deadline for the LOI is the 15th of November. So it gives you about 5 weeks. The LOI itself asks a bunch of questions that are mostly yes, no kind of questions, but then there at the very end, there's sort of more detail to submit a narrative on your ideas. So really excited to be part of this initiative, and really looking forward to having you all participate. We hope that we've been able to answer some of your questions, and that you are excited as we are about this opportunity. So thank you.